I don't usually do promotions, but this is the only place where I've seen a shirt that says this, and I think it's actually awesome. I bought one, and I'm going to take it and wear it in the office tomorrow in Boston. And there's a lady at the back here who's already got one on. Perhaps you stand up and model it for us. And they're only $14, so there's only a few left. So night shirt or whatever you want to do there. I mean, you could get creative, possibly, with what this look ends up looking like. My daughter cuts up t-shirts and does amazing things to them. You can see most of her body, but then. So yeah, I think this is really cool. So it happened right here in Easthampton, and I was here to see it.
Hi everybody, I'm Jessica Allen, I'm the city planner, City of Easthampton. Thank you so much for coming, this is such a fantastic turnout. We are here tonight, and hopefully you're at the right meeting, to talk about cultural districting, right? Okay. No other meetings tonight as far as I know. I'm going to facilitate the meeting, and we're going to sort of break it down into two different chunks. The first chunk is going to be a lot of more information. Burns Maxey, our fabulous arts coordinator for the city, she's going to give a quick presentation about cultural districts and what they are. And then Mary Jenkins from the MCC is going to give some information regarding other communities that have adopted cultural districts, successes that they've had, and how that's worked. And then our two co-chairs from the ECA Plus, Kristen Angel and Denise Riggs, will be talking about the partnership team, which is a really important part of the cultural district. The success of the cultural district really sort of depends on the strength of the partnership team, and we're hoping that part of what you'll do tonight is sign up to be part of that team. So they're going to give some information about that. Also talk about some of the draft goals and the mission statement that we've come up with so far. So that'll be the first half, less than half hopefully. The second part will be more of a brainstorming session with all of you. We really need to do, as part of this application process, we need to submit a 5-year plan on how this cultural district will function, what the marketing will be, what the development will be financially and planning wise, and the expansion opportunities. And so we will facilitate a discussion already. We have some ideas that we've brainstormed, but we're hoping we can really expand this list down. And we'll take this information and we'll start to compile it as part of the application and the 5-year plan. Any questions about the format tonight? No. Excellent. So I'm going to turn it over to Burns, and she's going to give a presentation on the Easthampton Cultural District.
Thanks, Jess. I'm just going to turn off some lights. I don't know if you can see the screen. You might want to come over here to get a better visual. Which one is it?
If we move this for right now.
So thanks everybody for coming. I'm Burns Maxey, the arts coordinator for Easthampton City Arts Plus. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I'm looking forward to tonight and hearing your feedback about the cultural district. I'm just going to give a quick overview of what a cultural district is. Let's see if I can get this. I'm going to have to turn this around.
Yeah, it's connected, but it's not responding.
Here we go. So I'll just start from here. So what is a cultural district? A cultural district is a walkable and compact area. It's easily identifiable to visitors and residents, and it serves as a creative center for cultural, artistic, and economic activity. It's also a specific geographical location area in the city, and it has a concentration of cultural facilities. There we go. Of cultural facilities, activities, and assets. And I think it's really important to understand what assets are. They are not just the arts. They actually also include restaurants, walking tours, schools, libraries, nonprofits, businesses, It goes far beyond just the arts. So what will a cultural district do for Easthampton? It opens the doors for opportunity and funding, potential funding. There's currently no specific funding as part of the cultural district right now when granted the designation. However, once we receive the designation, we will receive statewide recognition from the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism and the Massachusetts Cultural Council. And that will definitely lead to possibilities and openings for funding. It also includes opportunities for partnerships and really allows us to come together and think about strategies of how we want to promote the city of Easthampton. This is the proposed Easthampton Cultural District. ECA Plus submitted 3 districts to the MCC, and this was the suggested district that they chose from the 3. As you can see, it starts on Main Street and goes down Union, crosses over to the Manhattan Rail Trail, up Payson Avenue, and through the full length of Cottage Street. This area contains over 100 cultural assets. There's also, once there's outliers who are not part of this cultural district, as we know, those that are not included can be part of the map and really take advantage of the benefits of the statewide recognition. So I really encourage all that are not on the district to become partners as well. Why apply for a cultural district now? Well, I think that we all know this. Easthampton is really seeing a renaissance. We're seeing revitalization happening here, and it's exciting. And this really gives us the opportunity to come together and strategize about how we can promote the city of Easthampton together, and how we can show visitors the character of Easthampton. So we have a lot of multi-dimensional economic businesses that have developed here. Many people are here right now that are part of those businesses, and that's something that is extremely unique about Easthampton. So I'm going to leave up the proposed map here, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Mary Jenkins. She is the program manager for the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and today you can see I have my sneakers on. We took a walk, walked through the cultural district together, and it was very informative, and she has been instrumental in helping us through this process. So I think you'll really thank her for being here. So thank you, Mary. Thank you.
Gosh, you will look at it. Oh, that's better. You're going to look funny. Anyway, did everybody meet somebody they didn't know? Yes. That's very good, isn't it? Excellent. Well done. I am Mary Jenkins. I am with the Massachusetts Cultural Council. For those of you who don't know anything much about the council, we are the state arts agency. We support artists and cultural organizations throughout the Commonwealth. We also support educational programs, youth at risk, and in a variety of different ways and the local cultural council program, which this year I think is 29 years old, is in all of the cities. We oversee that program, and it provides funding locally for all of our cities and towns. And I run 2 programs at the Cultural Council, the Adams Arts Program for the Creative Economy and the Massachusetts Cultural District Initiative. Now, we've been funding Easthampton through the Adams Arts Program for some years. So this isn't the first time I've been to this community. I've been lurking on street corners here for quite a while. And you know what's so fascinating is actually what's happened in just the space of a very few short years. Because a group of people came together, worked with very closely with the municipality, and I want to recognize the mayor at the back of the room here, and said there's some things we can do here that will utilize our cultural assets to spur economic activity and community development in a way that we haven't done before. And I think anyone who's in this room will know that that's paid off in a number of different ways. I think there have been new business starts made in this community that are culturally based, in part because of the cultural activity that's taken place here. And I think that, you've come a long way. There are a couple of other people in the room, I think, could you put your hands up if you met me, probably about 6 years ago? Pierre is one, Denise. Yeah, would you put your hand way up? Okay. And then there are other people who came to the table later in the day, like the Chamber of Commerce, who've been a very strong supporter. I don't know whether or not anybody is here from the Easthampton Savings Bank tonight, but they've been a very strong supporter here. And the other group that I want to ask you to put your hands up are the artists who live and work here in this. Put your hands way up. Because in actual fact, this would never have started without you being here. And that was a surprise. I can remember 12 years ago, one of my colleagues coming back and sort of saying, there's something going on in Easthampton. We were in Boston, it was like, really? What's happening in Easthampton? And it was like, there's a lot of people making a lot of different kinds of stuff there. There's a group of people having a conversation really about how art is made. And there are two premier buildings in this community that house many of the artists here. The Eastworks and Cottage Street Studios were the ones that sort of really began to get underway. Through the Adams program, the ECA, as it's known, has really that was in line with the municipality, was the entity we funded to see whether or not we could continue to drive interest in culture in this community and bring people here from someplace else. So engage the residents, yes, but also bring visitors here who would say, wow, I've just seen this really great piece of art made by an artist living and working in Easthampton, and I want to come and see that for myself. Because we know that customers will look at a piece of art on a website, but it's really, to buy it, they want to come here. So you're attracting people from a community with an Ampton attached to it to the north. I mean, there's a drift to the south happening in this part of the state from Northampton, where the market rate for artists, as we know, is incredibly high. So that for Easthampton, that's for the city, and its residents, that's been an advantage, because as you arrived on the doorstep, you brought with you opportunity. And the Cultural Districts program is really about more opportunity. So it's a coordinated, intentional, cohesive way of actually being able to position the cultural assets and other amenities in this community to create additional economic activity. So that we set very specific goals for the program. And for those of you who got one of these sheets, these are the guidelines. You can find these online if you go to www.massculturalcouncil.org. And this program was designed based on work that's actually happening in other states. Right now, there are 12 states in this country that have cultural district programs, and the oldest of which is in Maryland. They have 19 cultural arts and entertainment districts. And just this year, in the past 6 months, we have designated 14 cultural districts. And I say this, which is pretty amazing, considering that there is no money attached to this program whatsoever at the moment. And that's, the fact that communities are approaching us and saying, yes, we're going to apply, yes, we want this designation, indicates to me how important culture is becoming in terms of the way that a community thinks of itself, imagines itself, and wants to position itself to other people. So that Burns was quite right. This has to be a walkable, compact area, so that people will park their car and leave it and travel through the entire district without getting back in their car. And why? Because we don't want them to cherry pick. We want them to experience the entire district on foot, so that if you walk the length of it, you'll be surprised by some of the businesses you'll come across here that are unique to here. This is not your mall experience. This is a unique downtown experience. There are stores here you can't find anywhere else, and that's what makes it distinctive. And I think that's what people will be surprised about here. So that it's about a visitor from someplace else, bumping into Easthampton in a way and being delighted by it, and being able to do that in a way that is incredibly accessible. So for those of you in retail businesses and culturally creative entrepreneurial businesses, we hope that you're going to end up making more money as a result of this initiative. And for those of you who are not in those kinds of businesses, but stand to benefit from the fact that you've got more people coming into the community, we see that just as a major plus. So there are some key things here in terms of the goals. There are 6 goals. One is attract artists and creative entrepreneurs. Well, you've done that, but there's room for more. And we went up to Eastworks and looked at what's actually happening with Lowell 180. There were some various retail spaces that are empty that could be utilised for cultural use. So in what way could you climb behind that? The other one is encourage business job development. How do we ensure that the people who are doing business can remain in business? How can we increase foot traffic in our downtowns? A lot of folks have turned their back on downtowns. It's not an experience, but I see a shift in that. I see a shift in terms of the way that people are wanting to experience a place for its uniqueness, because this is Easthampton. There isn't another place like Easthampton in this state or in the northeast. So how do you want to tell that story? Then establish the district as a tourist destination. And tourism dollars, right now, about 30% of the folks that go to cultural activities come from outside the state. And they come from areas much closer than we might imagine. They come from Pennsylvania and Connecticut and New York. Might have to swim from New York, but they come nonetheless. And then they get to high ground, and that's probably a good thing. And I wish everybody down there really well. Tourists, we know that cultural tourists will make decisions in advance about visiting a place because they find out about something that's going on there. So when you have a coordinated effort where a lot of different small things come together under a cohesive whole, then people will decide to make a trip based on the fact that they know there's a lot to do there. The longer that you can keep somebody, the more money they're going to spend. And that's a good thing. So that in this region right now, there are several other communities moving on a cultural district designation. Downtown Springfield, Northampton are making a move, and Amherst are making a move. And you might see that as competition, and to some extent you're right. But you're very different from Northampton and Springfield and the rest of those folks. And I think that's a good thing. And what we've always said about this program is that more translates into more money. So if you can keep people in this region and they visit the cultural districts in this region, it means there's more economic activity actually going on for everybody. And then they go home and tell their friends. And that's what we want. So we're working with a number of state partners on this program. When the legislation was passed and we were given responsibility for designing and launching the program, it required other state agencies to adopt this strategy and adapt their programs and services. So that we have the Department of Economic Development, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, the Department of Transportation, the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, and so on. And one of these sheets actually identifies who these folks are. And the reason we did this was because we knew that they had resources that they could bring to the table. And we've already begun to see that with the 14 districts we've already designated. The Department of Housing and Community Development have just given money to Gloucester for some work that needs to be done in their district. Right now we've worked most closely with the Department of Transportation and the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. All of the designated districts get a profile on the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism website. That site is seen internationally and nationally. So that you could be sitting in Dublin and come across, and we have a lot of Irish tourists. You'd be sitting in Dublin and come across the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism Cultural District section of their website and go, oh my God, look at that. Easthampton, these photographs of Easthampton look a bit like where I grew up, in some village in Ireland, and I'm going to go. It just struck me, this sign that hangs in the bar, sort of further up College Street, it just sort of struck me how fun that would be for somebody to bump into that if they came from that neck of the woods. It's a surprise. So, what does it take to become a cultural district? Well, it's one application per district. And some communities may have more than one district. The City of Gloucester have applied and won their designation for the Rocky Neck area, which has a high concentration of artists living and working in studios and galleries there. They are now moving on their second designation, which is for their downtown area. The designation process itself it's not speedy. We're encouraging communities to apply when they're ready, because the designation is for a 5-year period. And the important part of that is that, and you'll excuse me for saying this, Mr. Blair, but it travels over, if you like, any political transitions. So the designation actually remains in place throughout sort of what could be changed at sort of municipal level. The municipality is at the center of this strategy, and they are the applicant. They can decide to have an entity manage the district on their behalf. In some instances, we have a chamber. The Chamber of Commerce in Concord, Massachusetts, is managing the district there. They also provide visitor services for that community. And we left the provision for that to happen because we know the municipality is already extraordinarily busy. Some municipalities have decided to actually keep that responsibility for themselves and are running it through their planning department. So that's a choice, and we left that on the table. The other thing, so moving through, we require that each community pass a public resolution, or the municipality passes a public resolution, because we want the community to be supportive of this effort. That's why there are meetings like this. So you get to have input into whatever it is that's going on around this agenda in your community. Now that 5-year period is important because where you start in an effort isn't necessarily where you end up. So in your planning process, it's really important to be able to look at where you want to be in 5 years' time. Because although there are things that have happened here, there's more to do. And there's more to accomplish, and not everything is ready right now. So, so what do you want to do about that? What does development look like here, if it's culturally based? What are you going to do about some of those empty retail spaces? Who could you attract here? So, for instance, the City of Lynn, every time they had a cultural program, they asked property owners to open up their empty storefronts so that people could wander in and out. And in wandering in and out, perhaps they could imagine actually opening up a business for themselves. And then they got business people to talk to business people about how they were doing and whether or not it really made sense. And as a consequence, there were some businesses that actually started up in the City of Lynn, which we designated earlier this year. In each case, every time we've gone into a community to conduct a site visit, and I will be seeing many of you again at the point where we do that, after you've submitted the application, we review the application, we come back, we have a conversation with the municipality, we walk the district again. We bring, my boss comes, Anita Walker, I think some of you may have met her, and we bring a site advisor who is an expert in economic and cultural development, and they write us, the Mass Cultural Council, a report. It's a lengthy report. It includes their observations and recommendations. And that's a sort of free consulting service for you. We give it to you. And it's a document that you can use to leverage or open up a conversation with some of our other state agencies. We designed the application itself as a work plan, so that we ask that you inventory the assets that you have here and the public amenities that you have here. Of the folks that have applied, we've had one, there isn't no to a designation, there may be a not yet. And that not yet may be because there's something within a community that really needs to be taken care of before we're ready to actually provide the designation. And of the communities that have applied, there's one that we decided that they really weren't ready. They had 3 major buildings in their very small community that really needed a plan. They talked about, they wanted they want them to be utilized for creative entrepreneurs, but they really didn't have an idea of how they wanted to do that. So it was all potential. And the point about that is that when a visitor comes here, they have to be able to feel the edges of the district. They have to be able to feel that they're in a place that's special. So the idea of sort of feeling the edges of it, knowing that you're somewhere special, being able to take advantage of what there is to offer here and stay here as long as possible is really what it's all about. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that you want to do, but you can line those up over the sort of 5 years of the designation. The other thing you can do is you can re-up. At the end of 5 years, it's not, see you later. It's like, so how's it been going? And do you want to do it again? Do you want to do it for another 5 years? So if you decide you want to do that, you can. We're not going to make it difficult for you. The other thing people have asked is, well, what constraints come with having a cultural district? But from our point of view, there aren't any. But it does demand time and effort and focus and persistence to really see the results that you want for this particular community. So that's about being really smart about how you get to the work, and which you already are. So it's like, what's still on the table? And it's being able to be candid enough to actually say, these are the things that are tricky and difficult that we really need to take care of at some point. We were walking, we walked by the traffic lights here. We were talking about the park earlier and the fact that the city is looking for $700,000 in funding. And the mayor has been looking for that money for some time in order to build the boardwalk and so on and so forth, to enhance that space. Well, a lot of our parks are utilized for cultural use. So with the designation, could that be used to help leverage with the Department of Conservation and Recreation the money to be able to get there? Any questions at this point? I'm going to stop talking because I can...
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned Eastworks as one of the premier buildings, and yet it was excluded. And I understand the walkability issue, but that wasn't anything that could be handled at this point.
I don't use the word exclusion.
Well, it's not on the map.
It's not on the map. And let me... when you walk an area, and what you're looking for is a connection, a consistent connection in terms of space and what's happening in between. And right now, there's some development to be done in between where the town hall is and the art barn, and that stretch that leads out to Eastworks. Now, I think that with the designation over time, that will melt over the 5 years, so that that stretch of street will change. We put a provision in the guidelines so that an organization that's outside of the district, a cultural organization outside of the district, can partner in the district and be promoted by it, but wouldn't necessarily be it's not at the center of the district. Now, and in every case, we've gone back and revised the map with the communities, because obviously when it comes to sort of buildings, they're not all kind of beautifully laid out next door to one another. So for instance, in Concord, it's the downtown center that has been designated. Old North Bridge, the Louisa May Alcott House, the Concord Museum, the Nathaniel Hawthorne House are not in the designated district, and yet they're partnering in it. There are reasons, specific reasons for that, and they were included in the report. But it's not about excluding them, it's about mitigating some of the issues about their inclusion and seeing whether or not they can be worked on. So there are a couple of things. Over the course of the first year, we say work with this. This is like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, look at it from a really tight perspective when you begin, and then come back to us and tell us how it's working for you. Because it's not that we want to. I think Eastworks is a really important part of the community. I mean, incredibly important part of the artistic community and the fabric of the community for the residents here. And I know that it's part, you know, that people who live here know it and will walk past them. For a visitor, if you put down in this, by this traffic light right now, you've got, and this is a question mark that, in my mind, you've got a slight disconnect between here and where Easthampton City Arts is, and then you've got the same kind of, it's only a block or two, but nonetheless, it begins to feel as though you're in you're not anywhere. That it doesn't feel like, it begins to stop feeling like a cultural district. And I think that until that's sort of taken care of, it remains a question mark. So over the course of 5 years, what needs to happen in order for that to sort of go away?
One more follow-up question. Is there designated tourism parking? If you're talking about people arriving and then maybe being disconnected from another area, is the parking going to be designated for the tourists as a specific place?
I think it depends where the parking is. Obviously, you know, it's smart to be able to put amenities on the map so that people know, you know, if they're going to download a map of the district, then you can put put transportation points, and you can put parking that's available on the map, so people are really clear about that, because that's an absolutely fundamental part of people being comfortable, particularly Americans, comfortable about parking their car and actually getting out and walking anywhere. It's not right outside the store that they want to go into. So this is an adventure for people. And it's about high comfort, you know, at the point where they decide to go on that adventure. Does that make sense? Yes, you had your hand up.
Yeah, are we not looking at the rail trail as some sort of asset that would just combine the back of the, which is actually the front of the mill buildings, this is a mill town. I mean, if you're going out of your way to, again, another thing too is a traffic pattern is going to go down Pleasant Street because of the upcoming work on the Manhattan Bridge there. There'll be a lot of traffic just forced down that Pleasant Street corridor, but also it's a very pleasant walk on the rail trail that connects, you know, the Cottage Street to the Pleasant Street. And you've got this lovely, I hate using that word, to the pond kind of thing where we've gone through all kinds of charrettes for the lower mill pond. This would accelerate things. Plus, you have a nice tax base with all those landlords for those 4 buildings of about 1 million square feet. So I think there's something there that we're tripping over it. I think we could do something.
It's potential right now, yes?
I think it's there. I don't think it's a nascent idea. I think it's Eastworks has gone through many generations of people who have lived and died in their retail first floor. And
I have a question.
Well, that's what when we come back, what we'll do is we'll figure this out. You know, I mean, we're not going to, we were talking about this, I was with Denise and Kristen, and we were talking about how long it takes you to walk along the rail path in order to be able to get over there. Apparently it's about 4 or 5 minutes. That's about it. So, you know, again, the question is how, if you come here to sort of find the sort of cultural assets, the bike trail, how does that connect? Now you've got the edge of the bike trail here, so if somebody, you know, if somebody was going to...
Well, there's a park right there at Union
Right.
and, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is about connecting the dots and how they connect. So what we're going to do is make our best effort, our best judgment on whether or not there are... I have a question mark in my mind at the moment about whether or not there is more than one district here.
I agree.
And the need, you know, some people sort of will say, well, why would we do that? I mean, we're just one community. But actually, you know, this is one program where more is a good thing. Because the more you have to describe here, again, it goes back to the longer people stay here because of things they know that are going on. Think about, it's a much bigger city, but has anybody been to Portland, Maine? Mm-hmm. So, you know, the way that they've divided up the city into different areas, they're really small. I mean, this is not a big city. So that you've got the potential to do exactly the same thing here and make the most of it. And you can describe it differently. So Central Square in Cambridge has just been designated. And it's a really short, it was just named as the 6th best musical, new music spot in the country. Yeah, who knew? Now it's a city. It's a slice of a city. So the designated area, they had included a vast amount of residential area because they wanted to capture a small gallery over here. And we said, no, we don't think so. You can list that gallery, but we want you to really focus the effort and promote the effort, be really tight. So the designated area goes from a pub called the Plough and Stars, which does rock music, down to the MIT Museum. Because if you get to the MIT Museum, you can find the rest of that place called MIT. Sort of, it's on the edge there, and not get lost in that campus. So, yes.
My question is it something about that it has to be a single line? Or is it possible that it could eventually extend to become a loop, as he was saying? Because I also think of entering, you know, the Manhattan Rail Trail extends on. Although it is not, if you were from out of town, it would be incredibly intimidating to try to get into the buildings from there. I mean, because I go over there sometimes on my bicycle and you have to cut through. But is that something where it has to be a single line, or could it possibly be a line with a loop on it that, were it able to meet the requirements, it could still, you know, expand the district? Because it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine a cultural district that doesn't include Eastworks, as far as I'm concerned, because it's such a huge part of the arts in town. So that's my question: does it have to be a straight line, or can it?
Concord said the same thing about the Louise May Alcott House. You know, Concord isn't Concord without it. Well, we agree. I mean, it's not that we're eradicating that house. We're just saying focus. The intent is to focus. It's not to leave anything out. It's to focus it. And then people, think about it sort of like a spider web, if you like. You know, you're sort of, you get people to come into the center of that spider web, and then you kind of catch them in other places around the, sort of in the network. So, does that make sense? Yes, you've been asked, you had your hand up for a
I'm
while.
Josh from Artist Organized Art. I'm one of the Easthampton artists, and I run an organization in the vicinity. It's also global. I spent some time in Maryland at the Station North Arts District during the Open Walls project, and I actually interviewed Ben Stone when I was down there because I was working on the City Council meetings for Holyoke, which you probably know is also looking at the way to deploy its area.
Yes.
And so when I spoke with Ben Stone, I asked him for advice on how to gauge the Arts and Entertainment District cultural designation, and his response was very interesting. He said, it's not enough to just have a package of tax deductions. There has to actually be a fairly substantial pool of funding coming from the state to make the cultural district successful, and that the success of the Station North District really only built from the point that that happened. And you've said that there's absolutely no funding for this whatsoever. So I'm wondering how those two, completely opposite points of view can be resolved.
Can I take you back to Boston with me? Because I think I'd like to plant you in front of our legislators. Well, here's the interesting thing. At the point where we launched this program, we knew we couldn't launch it without it being a revenue. Given this economy, we couldn't make the program fly without it being a revenue program. But we also said we're going to come back to funding. So that many of you must be aware of the Community Preservation Act. It was a sort of similar thing. Now, the difference here is we're not going to ask anybody locally to impose a tax. We have designated 14 districts. We have 42 communities in the pipeline, and which I think is extraordinary. So with that, we've begun to build an effort with our legislature about funding. And obviously, those districts that are designated will be the first in line. And there will be money for this program. So whether or not it'll be included in fiscal year 14, I'm not quite sure. Next week, we're bringing together the 14 districts we have designated and for a convening to have a conversation about in what way what do they need in terms of incentives on a local level? Because we don't want to do this as a top-down process. We want it to be valuable to the communities that have this designation, so that this planning process actually means something. So that it's being able to sort of prioritize really what you want. So, for instance, just let me finish this thought. So Louisiana has a sales tax for artists. I mean, they don't have to pay sales tax. And that's worked very well for them. The interesting thing also about Louisiana is that incentive has stayed, because of the results they're seeing and the impact of their districts. They have 63 in that state. That incentive, the legislature maintained that incentive when they were getting rid of everything else fairly recently. So what we want to do is be very smart about whatever we put in place. Whether or not that's about, in Iowa they did historic tax credits, and that worked for them in sort of given that situation. We're going to probably end up, we're a little state, but it looks as though we're going to end up with more districts than any other state. Now, I've said I'm not competitive, but, that's kind of fun. Yes?
I just add on to what you were saying. When I dug a little deeper into the situation in Baltimore, I did find out that it wasn't just that there was the actual pool of funding from the state, but that it was that pool of funding allowed for the private stakeholders to come in and have skin in the game, so to speak, right, where their risk was leveraged against an equivalent risk on the state side. So it was more like a matching funding situation that actually created the growth, as opposed to it all being relying on the state. But I think that it took that level of commitment on the state side before the private stakeholders were willing to make a move. And in relation to that, I'm also working, I probably am no longer working on this as of Hurricane Sandy, but I have been working on the Atlantic City project, which is the $30 million a year for 5 years being spent to create a cultural district out of Atlantic City. All of that funding is coming from the Casino Redevelopment Authority. I noticed that we do have a casino situation emerging in the state, and I'm just wondering, has there been any consideration as to tying the funding pools for cultural designations to casino activity?
We have been in conversation with the legislature about supporting our performing arts organizations who are most badly hit by the development of casinos, who have contractually don't allow their performers to operate within a certain geographic vicinity. So that makes, booking some artists actually very difficult for producing theatres, and that's a sort of conversation in process. It actually does threaten those organisations, those performing arts organisations, producing and presenting organisations all over the state. So wherever casinos are located, there will be some offset or some funding provided for those organisations, so they can continue to provide community value in a way that the casinos have no, they'll provide performing programs, but it sort of is positioned slightly differently. Through the Adams program, which has been funding you here and you are continue to be eligible for, that's a matching grant program. And you have very successfully raised the match funds. It's an 80% cash, 20% in-kind match on a year-to-year basis. And you here have been incredibly successful. Since that program was established, we've dispersed about $9.5 million. And the communities, the 90 odd projects that they're not odd, but the 90 odd projects anyway, the 90 projects we've supported have raised over $19 million from the private and public sectors in a wide variety of ways. I mean, the story, the sort of story of how you raised money to support the Bear Fest here in the last 4 years is one I talk about quite a bit. So, because I think that's extraordinary. It's about small sums of money coming together to actually have a major effect and get you a lot of attention. And for real community benefit, as well as dollars for the businesses that are here, and bringing new people to Easthampton that might not have experienced the community in the same way. Yes.
Hi, Susan Hamlin Miller. I was born and raised here, gone for a few years, moved back because we love the town. We bought a home like a block away from one of the red lines because all the streets are not depicted on this map.
Yeah.
What I'm worried about is zoning changing, my taxes changing. Is there going to be more traffic on my street? I mean, I bought my home because I like to get up on Sunday morning and walk to Silver Spoon and then go to Biggie's and pick up something for dinner and go to Rite Aid and pick up my high blood pressure medication. Like what are you talking about? We're only a block away from what you're depicting, and you're not showing all the homes that are going to be potentially affected by the parking and everything else.
Well, I'm really pleased you're here, because I think the voice of residents in this conversation is a really important one. And I think that it's local policy. Our intent is not to we're not pushing an agenda that's about changing zoning or forcing up taxes for people who live in this community. This agenda is about boosting the wherewithal for this community to go about doing business. If the tax revenue for the city is able to increase because there's increased activity here, and I'm not talking about crowds of people running up and down Main Street. I'm talking about what I call a trickle-down economy, so that for 12 months of the year, you have more people coming in here to spend money. I think that's a win-win for everybody, because that money goes back to provide you local services which you need here. But certainly, I think that's an issue for a lot of communities. How and in what way does local policy need to be held down while this kind of growth takes place? So that while we have here, this is where we've been talking about this recently. We say enhance property taxes. It's written badly. We don't actually mean enhance your taxes so you pay more money, because none of us want to do that. Is there an opportunity to put some properties on the tax roll that aren't right now? If you have empty retail space, or you have buildings that are empty or at only used for passage storage, there is not the kind of tax revenue coming to this community that you need in order to be able to survive. So can that be something that can be turned around here. If those retail spaces are utilised, those mill buildings are used in a different way, then that's the money in the pocket of the municipalities providing services to you. And as we know, there isn't a community in the state that doesn't need to see some more money in order to be able to make that make sense. And in a sense, I think that's about the future of the community. So it's not about paying more now, it's being able to say, okay, so where are the gaps that we can easily fill? Where's the low-hanging fruit in terms of being able to create some economic development that just isn't there right now? So it's missing money, but I think that it's a really important conversation, and one that's why, in part, the municipality is at the centre of this agenda for us, because we know that they're the ones that decide and determine local policy based on what you want as a community, and that's really important. How many other people were raised here in Easthampton? Are we here tonight? Okay. How many people were raised in Easthampton and came back? And how many people have only lived in Easthampton for 10 years? How many people have lived here 5? How many people have just arrived, really, in the last year or so? Yeah.
Last month?
It's really interesting. And I think, our communities are fascinating because you've both got, the people who've lived and worked here and seen all the ups and downs economically in a community, have seen businesses come and go. And the question for all of these, for all of us, is how do we re-gear and reimagine actually what these places are going to be? Because when those mill buildings were built, they were for a specific use. Well, what kind of use are they going to be put to today in order to generate money and create businesses? I think. Yes, you've had your hand up for a while.
Did you say early on that it was going to take 5 years to establish the Easthampton Cultural District before it's designated as a district?
No. You're going to put the application in very soon.
November 15th.
You've gone,
2 weeks.
in 2 weeks, the application's going to come to us.
Okay.
What happens then? We read it, we see whether or not there's anything missing. We then get back to you and decide on a site visit date. We come back, we meet with the municipality, we do a site tour, we meet with stakeholders in the district, and then the site advisor writes a report for us, we debate the report, and we take a recommendation to our board who make a final decision about the designation.
Will these boundaries might change?
They may.
Okay.
I can't tell you, it may expand, we may come back with a recommendation for some contraction. I don't know. I'm not going to second guess that.
Okay.
Because this conversation involves my colleagues too, and you. And so that we hope this is wrapped up, so this designation moves in place, really early on in 2013, so you're ready to go. Does that?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you've got 5 years to run with it and do what you want to do. Yes.
I did just move here last month into Eastworks on the 4th floor. I'm an artist from Martha's Vineyard.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I moved here because of the mill buildings and the arts, and it was cheaper than Northampton, but close enough for me to go to my dance work. But before I went to Martha's Vineyard, I actually was in New York City on Madison Avenue. And I started the Madison Avenue Merchants Association 25 years ago that became one of the 2 first BID districts in New York.
There you go.
And I'd just like to say that any of these kinds of programs require a major commitment on the part of, in this situation, the artists, as many artists as possible, and the businesses. But when you put them into place, we took in 1 year, we took Madison Avenue from 59th Street to 82nd Street. We had a slew of armed robberies on Madison Avenue at the time. We had about a 30% unoccupied space percentage on Madison Avenue. We had filthy streets. We had 1 beat officer for 20 blocks. Okay? And in 1 year, before we became a BID district, just as banding together as merchants and creating a merchants association, in 1 year we dropped crime rate by more than 50%. All of the stores interconnected so that we actually patrolled each other as well as ourselves. And all of the security heads of all the big stores all interconnected, so we caught the shoplifters. We put our own sanitation program into place. We did cooperative advertising, full-page ads in the New York Times. Our occupancy went to 100% on Madison Avenue. And then we became a BID district that became city funding. We worked with, it was when Giuliani first got in, so I was working with Giuliani. And we ended up, in 1 year, the next year, we had a $2.9 million budget. And it completely transformed Madison Avenue, but it worked because we did it. We didn't ask for somebody else to do it for us. I went straight to the chief, the police chief, and said, we have a problem and we're willing to be part of the solution. And we will be your eyes and ears on the ground, but we need to fix this before somebody gets killed. And then within a month, we had the shooting at Vera Wang at the bridal salon, which made national headlines and highlighted that Madison Avenue was an unsafe place to go as a tourist. And this couple were shot in the bridal salon, Vera Wang. And it was an instantaneous zoom of like attention and focus and interest and funding. And it was amazing what we did because people got involved. And that's how it happens, is if everybody starts talking to each other and gets involved. I know that, I mean, I literally just moved here and I've been taking the Manhattan Trail over to Union Street. I went to this afternoon to the hardware store. And I'm an ex-New Yorker, and I didn't feel all that safe on that trail in the daytime. So, and I want to see Eastworks as part of this because I'm now here and I plan on being here for the next 20 or more years. But coming back, a new resident there, nobody told me that the doors lock from the outside. So I went back on the Manhattan Trail to go back into the building and was locked out of it. And then I had to figure out, well, then how do I, do I have to go all the way back around and over on Main Street and down? So that logistic is definitely something that Eastworks and the Mill Buildings have to work on the Manhattan Trail if they want to be part of it. It's an interesting concept to possibly have 2 districts, maybe, but our experience of people getting involved on the bottom level of grassroots and changing everything themselves, then the state got involved or the city got involved, and all of a sudden we had all the money we wanted. I mean, it was amazing.
It absolutely takes people. So I'm going to ask you a question. So if you were from someplace else, I mean, think about yourselves when you go traveling, and you haven't been someplace before. So I'm a city person. I was born and raised in London. So I begin to hyperventilate if there are too many trees. You put me down in the woods, that's my idea, that's my worst nightmare. It's like, leave me alone, I mean, forget about it. So my comfort level in places that are very green is not very high. So worth bearing in mind. You know, you get a massive amount of New Yorkers that kind of come up this way, and what they do is they take 91 and then they take a left. And they disappear into the Berkshires. Why is that? Why is that? I mean, you know, there is something to be said for being able to put yourself in front of those people and saying, hello, you know, we just go straight on for a minute, and there we are, you know. And once you've done that, I mean, they're the folks, you know, there are folks that's why North Adams and Pittsfield and Stockbridge, you know, they're actually fairly buoyant. We provided on our website, we read a lot when we designed this program, and on our website we put links to some of the other state programs and case studies from their own cultural districts, and also the things that we read that made sense to us about why do this, why bother, and picked out some of the best of them. And I would suggest that, you know, you dip and dive through some of these. Because I think it's sort of part of the conversation locally about how to do this and how to do this well. And I think some of the things that have been raised here tonight are about how do you provide the highest possible comfort level for the visitor that's here? And for some communities, that's actually as simple as putting out the welcome mat. We designated Rockport. When you think about Rockport is that bucolic New England seaside town, except that, the experience when you walk into some of the stores is that they're not really sure whether or not they want you there. It's changing. They're not very welcoming, and they don't provide you any information. So you see people. I was there in March. So there were people walking around town. They didn't have anything. There was no map. There was no, information. You walked into a store and it was like there was no information there, and the people behind the counter weren't necessarily going to give you it. So it's like if you kind of have to put yourself in someone else's shoes around doing this. How do you connect the dots for those people from someplace else in a way that sort of really makes sense? So that for Eastworks, if it's like if you're not going to walk this stretch or this, get back in your car. You can tell people what to do, and that's okay. Get back in your car because Eastworks is going to take you a while, or you might have to stay over to do this properly, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So where are they going to stay? So the city of New Bedford is not designated yet, but I've been working with the city for a long time, and they built their first hotel in a gazillion years that only opened 2 years ago. Prior to that, for the last 25 years, there's been no hotel in the city of New Bedford. 94,000 people. A couple of on the outskirts, a couple of motels that you would not want to tread on the carpet if you went there. But that's really about it. And they're downtown area, not a hotel. So one of the things, one of the interesting things about this program is you can focus on all the things that where's the potential? What do we want to get to? What still needs to be done? What's still on the table for us? And then what are the things in the woodshed that we don't want, that we really need to deal with, or that we need to take care of? And what are the things that we're going to hold down, from a policy point of view, in terms of things we don't want to change, or places we don't really want people to go or know about. If I lived in this community for 10 years, there would be nooks and crannies I wouldn't know about, but you would. And that's fine with me. You can just tell me, if I'm going to wash through here, there are places I don't need to know. You just need me to spend my money, and that's not a dirty word. I did this meeting in Provincetown, and Provincetown is a seasonal community. 50% of the people who live there become unemployed when the season is over. And somebody in a meeting said, we just want people to have a good time. I was like, yeah, that's great, but spending money is what makes sense for you. Spending money is what means that is what makes the difference between being able to actually pay for the teachers you want for your kids, and pay for the trash to be picked up and the streets to be cleaned and the health centres to be provided. I mean, whatever it is, the mayor knows. He's been doing it a long time. It's that. So in what way can this agenda, and it's not the only agenda, help you get to where you want to go? You may end up with a town that looks a little different. The businesses are not going to be the same as they may have been. It doesn't mean that the hardware store needs to disappear, or the pharmacy that everybody knows. It just may mean that you have a little more art to deal with. But I would be ambitious about what you want for this community, because you've done incredible work so far, and you are a creative community, no question of that. So I stop now? Anybody burning to ask a question? Yes, we'll take two more then.
I just wanted to revisit what you were saying about how people come up 91 and then they go west to the groceries to fill up. And I wondered if anybody has considered the impact that the rerouting of the Amtrak train up through Northampton and Greenfield and Bradford is going to have. I think that might address that somewhat. And I actually work out of Eastworks. I don't live in Easthampton. but I live in one of the 50 towns that cannot get any form of high-speed internet. I am still, and I've been a web designer. I've been running my business on dial-up. We can get satellite, that's good. So there's Wired West, it's going to wire up all of the 50 towns. They've actually, this year, they're running the fiber optic backbone up in the Wendell and all the other 50 towns. That's Mass Broadband Institute. And then Wired West is going to wire up the rest. And how that is relevant to Easthampton is that I think that once the train station goes through and fiber optic is available in all those towns, they'll go from the bottom of the barrel to the top of the barrel. I think that New Yorkers are going to start moving up. People from the New York City area are going to start moving up here, and I think there's going to be sort of a liaison and a connection, because there'll be a commuter train. I think I read by 2014 that you'll be able to get on the train and there'll be an internet connection, and you can work in the city and you can start your day in the train going down. So I think that's going to change a lot, and I think it's great, but I also am worried about how it changes the area and how that. I think it needs to be managed and thought about in terms of a new impact to the whole region.
I think also, I would add to that, you can offer an experience that is nothing like a sort of city person. Nothing like a city. You offer.
And I went to Parsons, by the way, so I lived in the city before.
Right. So you can offer this sort of small town experience, and that's really what America is all about. That small town experience, when people say hello or smile at you on the street. It may be a bit worrying if you're in the city, but nonetheless, it's like, wow, people smiled at me. And they were really nice. And when I went into one of the stores, they were really friendly, and they gave me information, and I found something to eat, and I bought something, and I had a good time, and it was Easthampton.
And I'm going to go back.
Exactly. Thank you. So, last question from somebody who hasn't spoken. Yes,
Robert Cobb, Manhattan Bike. I wonder if it'd be pertinent to ask Jessica for an update on the grant.
The MassWorks grant?
Yeah.
We should be hearing any day now.
Any day, because I know a lot of this stuff can be intertwined in dialogue.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you for that presentation.
Kristen? And Denise? Excellent.
Here we go. We want to really maximize the last 45 minutes that we have, but if anyone wants to stand up and stretch for 10 seconds, please do, because I know it's hard to sit still for so long.
Don't leave.
Don't leave. Change chairs if you must, but don't leave.
I will do
I'm also a veteran, and I wanted to be there.
We're talking about WSM. So the first round was annual re-up, just goes to them. So they weren't even considering that. We don't set some million. I didn't know that. This was can't see the way about the system. Right now we have to have someone who is all the I did. Yeah, so I was wondering, I'm not sure what I'm welcome back. So welcome back. So you're living in Downton? So zoning is happening too much. There was at one time some talk about expanding downtown. That's a really That's always been the power. Get out
I know, sorry. Okay, so what we would like to talk about first and foremost, just to briefly, well, actually effusively thank those of you who have already agreed to be partners on the partner management team for the cultural district. And for those of you who have not yet considered becoming partners, we would like to urge you to become partners. What the importance of partners are, speak briefly about the partner management team. Partners will be the people who get together and create the plan for the development and the marketing and the expansion of the cultural district once it's been established. So as you may remember, Mary talked about how important it was for us to get our cultural district established as soon as possible. We want to be as high up on that list of 60 some odd cultural districts that will eventually exist in the state of Massachusetts. We could potentially be anywhere between numbers 15 and 20, which is a very exciting prospect. So we're going to be putting our application in November 15th. In order for us to complete the application process, we need to have 15 partners. At this point, I believe we have somewhere between 5 and 7, which is a great start. So if you are not actually going to become a partner, please help us to get the word out. Find different individuals, businesses, artists, cultural assets who are willing to become partners. And again, what that means is that we're not going to ask you to put any money in. We're going to ask you to put your time and your brain power in to help us to develop this district over the next 5 years and potentially even longer. The meetings for the Cultural District Partnership will happen quarterly, so 4 times a year. We're not asking for a lot of time, just a lot of brain power. Does anyone have any particular questions as regards partners specifically?
It doesn't matter if it's individuals or groups?
Individuals can become partners in the district. We would like to have cultural assets in the city become partners, and we would like most of our partners to be cultural assets. For example, the Chamber of Commerce.
The Chamber of Commerce is one. The Local Works Committee is another. Emily Williston Library is the third. The Easthampton City Planning Department. The Historical Society. Mount Tom's. And ECA.
ECA Plus?
We were easy.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't have to talk to ourselves. Oh, and Popcorn Noir / the Lobby. And Eastbourne Custom Framing.
And the Art Park.
And the Art Park. And Climb Studios. Very exciting.
We're here. We're here.
Excellent.
We have to do it.
Well, we can have individual representatives within those groups. However, I would guess that there is the potential there for a group, who say, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, to designate someone to come to each of the meetings. So what that means is that if you are the designated person to go to the meeting 1 month, it may be that someone else is going the next month, but the important part is to be there representing your asset. Any other questions?
Contact Barbara Lombard, who chairs the Manhattan Rail Trail on here as her designate.
Okay, great. So Manhattan Rail Trail is in?
We're working on far with us.
Okay, great. Okay, so thank you all very much. We will be announcing soon when the first partner meeting is. There's the potential for one happening on November 5th at noon, but
we'll send you an email. So it is essential for you to leave your contact information behind with us so that we can get in touch with you to let you know when that meeting is. Okay? So moving on, the community input portion of this evening, which is the most essential part. So I want to make sure that we get as much community input as we possibly can. We've gotten together over the past, I don't know, 5-6 months or so. We've been collecting information, collecting ideas for the application. And some of the portions of the application that we need to have are a proposal for a mission, proposal for goals for the cultural district, and as well some ideas about the 5-year plan for marketing, expansion, and development, for example. So what I'd like to do right now is to have everybody take turns letting us know what your ideas are. We're going to collect them on these large pads of paper, and then we're going to be bringing them all together into the one document that will become our application. So anyone would like to start? And
Well, let's just,
in fact, yeah,
let me just go over sort of what each of the topic areas that have been identified for tonight. I did have handouts of all this information. They must still be on the copier downstairs. I don't know what happened. So if you want, I have PDF copies of this that I can email to you, so let me know, and I'm happy to do that if you want to look. I know the type is a little small for the larger setting. So did you want to talk specifically about the mission statement and run through it? Not right now?
I'm going to circle back around if we have time at the end, but I want to really get some input from everyone first.
Can I just, in my planner world, the mission sort of is the umbrella that sort of drives us a little bit, so am I just touching on it just briefly, just because I think it, okay. So establish, maintain, and promote the district, work immediately to expand the district to include Pleasant Street, work with the local government, local businesses, and creative economy to fulfill the cultural and economic potential of the district, and provide residents and visitors with opportunities to engage the talents of the creative community and celebrate the unique cultural assets of the cultural district as well as Easthampton as a whole. Does anybody have anything burning in their head that they think is missing out of this right now? If not, we can get input later. Goals. Improve economic growth and sustainability of downtown by increasing sales, property values, profits, and rents, thus improving the tax base. Second goal, through strong leadership, establish an effective organization with common vision and set priorities while building public and private cooperation. 3, build awareness and appeal for the Easthampton Cultural District to residents and visitors. 4, educate and encourage property owners in the city to maintain and improve the integrity of the district and increase its appeal to residents and visitors. What number am I on? 5? I can't count. End of the week long. Create connections with all Easthampton cultural assets. And lastly, work with the city and community to establish a cohesive wayfinding system that improves the navigability and visitability that includes all citywide cultural assets. Right. Pretty encompassing. I think it hits all the key notes. Anybody feel like there's something missing? Yes.
I'd like to see some kind of collaboration with our schools. I feel like, you know, if we're looking to really build this as a cultural council, let's look to young people and bringing them in. So yeah, school collaboration at some level.
I think that's really important too. And I think that we kind of summed it up as cultural assets, which includes businesses, which includes schools, which includes artists, which includes parks, which includes any number of, you'd be surprised by how long the list is, but yeah, it's good to really focus on that.
I know when we speak to some of the younger people, the teenagers, they don't really appreciate what our town has, and so maybe by starting to, you know, get this in the way they think and the way they look at their town, you know, we can help build them.
I'm always thinking about teenagers and how it's an underutilized energy source.
And maybe the same way the Canadian Rail Trail, about involving our youth because they're accessing it all the time, and there would be less vandalism if they were more involved.
Yeah. Can I suggest that one of the things we have is to create linkage between cultural activity, the assets, and other kinds of businesses within the community? Because that's often a really underplayed area. So that, you know, if and there's a lot of people, you know, we tend to silo activity. You know, if a visitor does this, they're not going to do that. Well, actually, it's not true. So when you think about if you were to design a 24-hour visit to Easthampton for a visitor, what would they be doing? And where would they connect? Everything from gas stations to restaurants to the pharmacy to, what does the whole picture look like, not just part of it? So that linkage piece is about business, how business is done. That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Very smart point.
Okay, anything else with goals before I go into strategies?
Your goal number 3 is the one that mentions the cultural.
Number 3 is build awareness and appeal for the Easthampton Cultural District to residents and visitors.
Which is part of what we're doing right now.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be a slightly higher priority than your?
They're not, I just read, they're just bullets, sorry, I just said one, two,
Not best to
three,
last.
four. They were not prioritized. There's no weighted system, right? Okay.
That's where there's dots instead of numbers.
Exactly.
But there's going to be a lot of work going
Interjected
into that over the next couple of weeks, so we do appreciate that.
Okay, let's move into the details. So that's sort of the umbrella. This is our mission. We've got the goals, and now we have these strategies that are kind of fitting under these goals and mission. All right, so we have 3 topic areas that we wanted to focus on. Marketing, self-explanatory. Expansion, looking beyond this core tight district and looking for Pleasant Street. And then lastly, development, which for my own sake I need to define. So it's mostly regarding planning efforts, but also financial development as well. So I encourage you to just shout something out. We'll try to maintain some level of decorum here.
Pen ready.
Pen ready. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Everything's going up on the sheets, and then it will be up to the partnership team to sort of weed through this information and come up with like a really focused list of priorities that go into the 5-year plan. Yes, Robert?
Well, I'm concerned about consumerism. We do our best to recycle, but it's pretty miserable sometimes. There's always trash.
So could that be encourage recycling?
Yeah, there has to be someone to consult with this. I mean, we don't necessarily want to encourage everybody to have a plastic water bottle. I mean, how many more plastic water bottles will we have by building this district? I mean, what do we do about it?
So more of a city, more...
There has to be people thinking about this and having answers for us.
Well, yeah, that's my office.
I'm really happy you're on top of this thing.
But I think, okay, so I just want to clarify, so more of a citywide presence in terms of recycling program within the district?
Consumerism in general, which includes, I don't know how many times I've been sort of forced out of jobs because I've taken, stuff that giant companies were throwing away, which was perfectly edible, called various services or kitchens and have them come down and just take it away and have the manager standing there going, what the hell are you doing? I said, I ain't throwing away another, 500 pounds of good food here because you're too lazy to make a phone call or you can't get permission.
So encourage recycling and reuse / sustainability.
But
Yes, sustainability.
This relates directly back to what Mary was saying about the 24 hours. What would you do with the person who comes to visit within the 24 hours? And you do need to address both ends of the beginning and the end of the journey for them.
Well, Concord, Mass. just banned plastic bottles.
Yay.
What? They don't.
Concord.
So, if you're a visitor, where do you get something to drink? Wonderful.
Well, I'm going to the brewery right there. I'll be right there.
In terms of marketing, you want to look at that. Any entities outside of the area that we can communicate with? I mean, in terms of like radio stations in Boston, in Hartford, in Providence, public service announcements on some of the stations.
So making media connections outside of the
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I may add on to that a little bit, I also, some of you are probably familiar with, now we're within our 2nd year of being part of the Hampshire County Regional Tourism Council. So we are a chapter amongst many of the chapters within Massachusetts. And I happen to sit on that council as well. So we're really starting to see a lot of really good activity now that's occurring. And obviously they are very affiliated with MOT, the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism. I know that perhaps Suzanne at least has had a bit of a conversation with you. And it's a wonderful opportunity where Easthampton, Amherst, and Northampton, primarily from the chambers, have collaborated to make sure that we have a strong presence, and we certainly put Hampshire County on the map as part of Western Mass, that it doesn't go from Boston to Worcester to the Berkshires, that there is a lovely little slice right in between. So everyone here should be very excited about the energy that's occurring with that. And I currently am the only one from Easthampton that sits on that council, but I think that this is something where that there could certainly be a partnership. There's dollars that are being spent on an annual basis that are coming from the state, that there needs to be a good conversation that happens, and I think that kind of falls under perhaps the marketing and the planning and the financial part of it, that I really encourage someone besides myself to be on part of that, because that is such a good symmetry that could happen with this, and would just, again, put Easthampton even more so on the map.
What's it called again?
Hampshire County Regional Tourism Council.
Hampshire Regional?
Hampshire County, HCRTC.
There you go.
Yeah. I'll get you more information.
Josh. One suggestion and one short question. The suggestion is for the establishment of an international residency exchange for artists, not 100 artists, but say, a program which would have every year maybe 10 artists that do an international exchange, so that there is really a sense that Easthampton's not only local, but that it's also bridged, and that it's also transcontinental in terms of its reputation, which, of course, my company happens to, that's exactly what we do, so we'll be able to help. The other part of the question is, if you become a partner organization, you're not looking for like an exclusive, right? You don't mind if we're partners with many other things. There's no
we'll share.
So let me just, we'll also,
Thank you. Excellent idea.
Put us down.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Lisa.
I don't actually live in town, but okay, that's the So I run a group called Design Venturers Western Mass, and the idea is to network together all kinds of visual artists and designers and sculptors and lighting designers and architects to build collaborations. And my primary focus is design in the built environment, though it could encompass other types of design collaborations. So I've been hosting meetups. It's a meetup group. I've been hosting, we have 85 members, and some of them in Easthampton, but they're all around the valley. And at this point, I have a degree from Parsons School of Design, so I've been down to the city to start trying to build a liaison between groups in New York. I've actually created a liaison with a group called Damsels in Design that has a similar mission that's out of New York City. We're going to do some sister meetups, but I'm really interested in this idea of building a link between New York City artists and designers and Western Mass. I think there's a real symbiotic possibility for that. And one of the things that is really frustrating right now is like there used to be a bunch of free venues and they've all dried up. Like, I used to be able to use the Media Education Foundation to do events, and now they've changed their policy so that you have to apply a semester in advance, and you have to be one of the selected groups to be able to use the space. You can't just go book it. Jones Library is the same, it's like it's booked months in advance. When I would this space would be ideal. For example, just an open community space that's got a projector, that has a screen, that has a wireless connection, that you could host arts events in. Actually, design, like for instance,
It's a flywheel, so it's town hall space.
Yeah, the thing is, like right now, I don't charge for the meetups, and I'm running it all by myself, so I can't afford to pay rent.
They don't charge.
They don't charge?
They don't charge. Last I knew, they didn't charge. But check in with them. I can't speak for
I should
them.
talk to them. Let me build a link between New York City and Easthampton around arts and design collaboration. And one of the things I see when I go down to New York City, like there's a co-working space down there called Treehouse in Brooklyn, and they're like they're trying to grow trees on the roof, and they've got a beehive. Don't tell anybody, it's not legal in Brooklyn. But they're keeping bees on the roof, and they were trying to grow a section of a geodesic willow house that was eventually the branches were going to grow together, and they had to train around a window, and the whole idea is this is going to be this living house. They're trying desperately to try to bring some nature into their environment. They have no space to do it. We have tons of space, So, and we love that design energy. I mean, I drive down to New York all the time just so I can stay connected to that. And I just think it's a symbiotic relationship that has such an advantage.
Absolutely, and if what we're looking for our expansion of the district is to make those connections, then using some of those outdoor spaces in order to connect some of the mill buildings or Cottage Street to the center of town or whatever, that using that outdoor space by utilizing designers is an
some of the
excellent idea.
CSAs for expansion.
Yeah, can we use this to generate some money? Can we use this as a website? Can we brand this? Is there something that we can do to not rely on the, the state, as it were?
Can we rely on the state to a degree? We don't like to be dependent upon the state.
Exactly.
We do want to be
Can we have can we have an enterprise zone at 1 Ferry Street? Can we do something?
1 Ferry Street's already a Chapter 40R Smart Growth District. It's an overlay district that's
Optional for developers that can be used for mixed-use development.
Could we speak to Mass MoCA or do something along those lines to?
But we need to make sure that the property owner wants.
Exactly.
It's a building for sale. It's on the market right now.
He offered to build me a custom bike shop.
So, I mean, we are in communication with that landowner. He's very good about keeping us up to date, and the mayor especially, about what he's doing. So until he's ready to either give it to the city so we can do something with it, or,
Why don't we just make him an offer?
Of $1.3 million?
He can't refuse.
John? Isn't that losing money, not making money?
I didn't say give him money.
What is money?
I had a couple ideas that I wanted to say before I forgot. One was that involving the colleges also, I think, has some benefit, both as a connection in terms of, just artist to artist, artist to faculty, but also keeping in mind that a lot of them are not local, so when they bring their families in town for graduation or whatever, you could have Easthampton be a place where it's we have to go to Easthampton.
That's a great idea. And,
Just successfully involve colleges.
Market to colleges?
Yeah, market to the colleges.
And there are some of those links that exist already. We've had some interns come to work for ECA Plus. Hampshire College has this amazing magic board, and they've recently asked us to solicit films and projections from the ECA Plus artists. And so once those connections are made, it's going to be easy to build upon those. And it's true, those college students bring in their parents, and those parents bring money for the most part.
One other thing before I forget, just because I wondered if it dovetailed with the idea about the recycling and whatnot. For a while I've been wanting to suggest that we might make a collaboration with artists to make the garbage receptacles and trash and recycle receptacles art projects, so that maybe even tag teaming with a business. So if it's in front of your business, the business works with the artists, and the artist makes it an attractive thing. Just to give you an example of an idea, the zoo I grew up near had just regular trash receptacles. They had one that looked like a lion, and all the kids would go and find stuff to put in the lion's mouth. So it was just so simple. That's cool. It's a art project for somebody, but it worked.
Iceland has the most beautiful outdoor sculpture collection, and there were times when I thought I was approaching an outdoor sculpture, and it turned out to be a recycling container or a trash bin. So you can do the same thing with the fire hydrants.
As long as they're on the right top for us firefighters to know it's.
I'm not sure if I see anyone. Create a media hub, because lots of people are doing interesting things and sometimes doing media. Like, 1 Cottage Street, we always are trying to get attention for our thing, but there's a lot happening, a lot of synergy.
which, you know, kind of bigger connected, what's the bigger story might help us get bigger coverage.
Yep, that's a very good idea. Harry, actually, in the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, with every cultural district would be designated, we're asking them to develop a Facebook page, which sounds kind of like a blur in a way, but the reason for that is because people can upload their own information, their own information on it, so it's still vital that way. The city of Pittsfield have a Facebook page called Cultural Pittsfield. You should check it out in terms of what they do with it. They have 9,000 friends right now.
What's the name of it?
Just for that sign, Cultural Pittsfield. You know, apropos to what Fletcher was saying, I wonder whether or not, given the sheer number of artists here, a number of buildings that could be appropriate for cultural use, I wonder whether or not exploring a creative economy venture capital fund would be worthwhile. Because otherwise you're going to be development-led rather than actually driving it yourselves.
I was going to ask if anybody's partnered with the credit card companies yet in any of your ventures. When we were on Madison Avenue, we actually partnered with American Express. They underwrote everything we did. Our full-page ads in the New York Times, we had the American Express logo on the bottom. They paid for them. They paid for all of our banners on the street when we had special events. All we had to do was put their logo on it, because any time you're creating an event that money is going to be spent at, they're going to put it on a credit card. So there are divisions of both American Express and MasterCard Visa. American Express is the easiest because it's one corporate, and MasterCard Visa is all separate banks. But there are divisions just for economic development funding for exactly what all you guys are talking about. They'll fund the garbage cans. They'll fund all that kind of stuff. Like, they'll just give you the money.
That sounds lovely.
Well, and the mention of collaboration and thinking about the schools made me think about to try to explore what are some of the smaller communities in Easthampton, such as we have Riverside, is its own little community there. We have like Cottage Street. Could we get some collaboration going between or Williston is like another community that's within the town. Can we look at all those smaller communities and try to get some collaboration going in between them for town arts projects? And just collaboration between some of the micro communities in town.
We love collaborations.
Did you say Williston School was a partner?
The Williston Northampton School is a partner of BCA Plus, and we're hoping they'll join us.
But they're not a
Not yet, but they've just been asked.
Kristen? On marketing, you know, it sounds a little wrong, but why don't we consider hijacking other towns' events? You know, there's always festivals going on. I mean, how many times have you been to a festival in other towns where we could be putting out information about our own events and our own things by simply, you know, manning the booths? You've got hundreds, thousands of people coming to these. We can be getting the word out and marketing by simply having some person come and volunteer for a couple hours to go to this festival and pass out information and talk about what we're doing in our town.
Have a booth at Park Bar.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be a big construction project replacing the bridge on Route 10, and I'm wondering if they're going to close the street there or not. Could we make a big block party or something? And like,
You're sending vibes back.
I didn't mention that.
As long as we buy true beer and the party, then I think I'm down.
I know I already spoke, but I have one thought. I've said to people that I wish you could just freeze Easthampton the way it is, because I love the fact that it's got arts, but it's got all these great small businesses. That's like the town I grew up in, where there's like 3 family-owned hardware stores. There's Al's Clock and Watch. I love Al's Clock and Watch. I think it's awesome that those businesses are there, and I don't want to lose that character. And I'm kind of frightened that it will become like Northampton, which I think has become,
So how to help maintain the existing small businesses that are not necessarily
But I wanted to give an example of Block Island, and Block Island is actually past zoning, that there are no chain stores allowed in Block Island.
We've talked about that.
And it's brilliant
In the master
because,
plan.
you know, they say that the difference between wealthy communities and poor communities is that in poor communities, the dollar recycles through the community once and then leaves. And in wealthy communities, the dollar recycles through the community 20 times before it leaves. And that makes a huge difference. Because it's small businesses supporting each other. They bank locally. If you have Walmart, they're not banking locally. And, you know, so I just, you know, it's like, it's great that this is happening here and in Holyoke too, but, you know, how do you protect all the hard work that you've done so that, you know, it doesn't, so that casual, you know, like what happened in Harvard Square, which was awesome when I was a kid, but it's awful now. It's become like an outdoor mall because it's all changed to Nantucket.
You could complete that sentence to say and residential areas, which might address some of the concerns of the one resident who was here earlier.
Very good.
And residential areas, because I think it's really important that the residents get respected and feel like they're part of this and that it's not going to bring unwanted things.
Jessica, could you maybe,
Yes.
I'm just wondering if putting in a plug about the master plan and the master plan implementation.
You're on the committee.
Okay. I'm on the committee, and I just want to point out that there's a tremendous deal of overlap in a way, because those are already goals within the master plan. And so there is not only a master plan, and if any of you haven't seen it, I recommend you do. It really lays out a 25-year plan and these overarching goals. But I might also encourage you that whether you join the master plan implementation committee specifically or not, yes, no, maybe, but you might get involved with some of the implementations that have objectives like keeping the character of the town, not having big box stores, et cetera.
So are you looking for?
I'm mostly trying to tell people that you might already have that ball rolling,
Right.
but it's not in the cultural district.
So maybe what
It's
we
in
need
the-
to do is, and I can do this, I'll take the responsibility of looking at the master plan and pulling out strategies that make sense to fit into this as well.
And in addition, working with the Master Plan Implementation Committee, so that we're not all off working on the same
Reinventing the
project
wheel.
without
That's right.
realizing that we're working on the same thing. So
You're good.
again, we love collaborations.
Maybe they could be a partner.
Yeah.
You're going to look at the
Well, I think we
master
are.
plan
Master
and
plan, and review it for
I don't know.
anything that relates.
I live here, but I don't, my work is totally outside of this area. So I am really here just as a resident. I'm here as local works also. But I'm thinking we also, it might be good to encourage to get a couple people on the committee, or members, that are just residents. And I'm on it as part of local works, but if I can do it separately, just as a resident, I would like to do that. And if we
Almost
get-
like having them as a partner.
Yeah.
Is there a way to?
I'll be a
There
partner.
is,
You know.
absolutely. You're welcome to sign up as a partner, as
Resident
an
partner.
individual, and Denise can go as the local works rep.
We'll just put you
know,
under
and so-
special intelligence.
That's assuming I'm special.
As long as, you know, you can have many partners if you like.
Yeah.
And you can have everybody in the district.
Yeah.
If you need, the thing that becomes, what you need to do is to figure out the three things that actually running those kinds of partnerships are transparency, communication, and accountability to yourselves and then to people elsewhere. Those are the three cornerstones. How does the work get done? Because you've got a lot of people in the room, you've got a lot of different opinions, and that's fantastic because that helps move the work forward. So don't be daunted by the number of people who might want to come to the table about this. That's a good thing.
And I know I mentioned the number 15 at the beginning, but just to be clear, we need 15 partners already in order to complete our application, but then we can add partners.
Just a suggestion for how we name those people, because, I mean, I have 3 hats. So, and you have 2, and probably good not to forget to note residents, you know?
Yep.
Are there block associations in this area, like we used to have in Brooklyn? Are there like residential groups or anything?
No, but it is one of the ideas in the master plan.
Sort of, I think they disbanded, sort of, kind of, I don't know, I don't know their status.
I have a suggestion. Being a member of the Manhattan Rail Trail, we've had conversations about, like putting art on the rail trail or having art-related events on the rail trail, whether it's musicians playing or we have a sculpture that's up. So I'd like to see more integration included.
Public art on the rail trail.
When do you get a bike?
Where do you?
We all know.
Robert Cove, Manhattan Bicycle. Find you right down at Paragon.
But you can rent a bike as well.
Yes, you may. Yeah. I even loaned it.
That should be promoted.
Right.
What about better utilizing some of the events we've already got? I know we do the fireworks display every year with the chamber. I mean, that's not something that's really bringing in a lot of our assets and a lot of our businesses as much as it could. So looking for things like that. And every summer they do the concerts in the park off the trail. I mean, I went last year and I think there were 3 people. And so utilizing events that we already have, people that are already investing their energy and their time into getting these projects going. The Pumpkin Festival last weekend, we can be, we can be utilizing what we already have without having to do the legwork of starting something new, but better focusing our energy on the existing events.
And part of the motivation for the expansion to include the whole area down in the mill buildings, it's not just the mill buildings, but also the park and the half shell and the performances that are there. And Parks and Rec has been asked to become a partner. Yes.
They're on
So they're definitely on our list.
Maybe one of the ways is by going back and forth on that collaboration, that, the cultural can sponsor this event, can act as a sponsor. So that way, there's that back and forth, that not only are we asking them to partner and help us with our project, but that we're also co-sponsoring their events and their activities, just to raise awareness of, the...
You raised a really good point, because at a lot of these events, you always find the Rotary there.
Yes.
And that's how I got there, when I was on the Rotary. So they just seem to be visible everywhere.
I would also say take existing events and see whether or not you can build additional cultural components to them. So for instance, if you think about fireworks, and you think about the elements of that, and you think about fire, then you can add fire eaters, fire dancers. You could add, it just goes on and on. You might have to negotiate with fire, the people of the fire department here, but there are a lot of things you can build out that will increase traffic because you're doing things along the route that are complex, that can be incredibly effective and very easy.
The art walk is one of those really big collaborations that we have going on already that we can make new connections with and we can expand upon. And who knows? Maybe in the future we'll have artwork every Saturday.
I think
You just gave somebody a lot of work.
Just putting it out there, Susan. The fact that we're going to have many more tourists that are going to come into our area and repeat and refer. How do we establish that database? Because that is where marketing should go to and the communication should go to. So the idea of going into Nash Gallery and making those great purchases. So where are you from? Oh, get on our mailing list. That database is going to be.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the reporting out process? Yeah, this is something we've been going over.
All right, okay, so you can't get involved, there are 2 things we need to gather data on. Because we're a state agency, we have to benchmark this, but we require of every community, every cultural district. One is visitation. We want to know whether or not there's an increase in visitation, and the second is occupancy. You can choose other data points if they suit you, but those are the 2 things. And it's, people kind of say, well, visitation, that's a nightmare, but actually it's not. What you do is you select a few organisations within the district and they measure, they count who's coming. What you picked up on is exactly right. And funnily enough, I was in Natick at the open studios they had there. And they had, actually what they had done is taken their high school students And all of them have to do community service. They've taken all the honours kids, but there are a lot of other kids who could do this and all who need community service. And they were the ones at the door counting. They were asking, what zip code are you? How did you hear about this? What they didn't do was actually say, would you give it your email? Because that way you're growing, you're growing your constituency. With occupancy, I think that the focus on the district is it's certainly around what space is empty, what space is available too, because it's not just retail space, but it's also, is there space above the retail space that really isn't utilised, that a property owner actually could be making money out of, that might be suitable as a studio space, but they hadn't thought of utilising in that way before. So, and it's interesting because a lot of communities don't have an inventory of their downtowns in terms of space or turnover of space, only because it's something that just doesn't. It changes.
Yep.
A great deal.
It's something we've talked about doing, and I'd like to see done.
Can I add to that? On the Manhattan Rail Trail, every year we have a grid, and we email our friends of the Manhattan Rail Trail plus ourselves, and we have this grid, and we sit there, we each have an hour shift for the whole day, and you just count off, people on rollerblades, people in strollers, people jogging, people bicycling, and then we compare our numbers year to year.
The one thing I would suggest here is that you get very granular, so that, when you look at the goals that we set for this program in terms of increasing creative entrepreneurs in the community, well, okay, so if you put that in as a goal, if you reflected that goal back to us, how many do you want to see and by when? What kind of increment would you increase? It's like, there's a commitment there. You have to make a commitment. If you want to boost the capacity of the business community, what actually does that take? Is that going to be additional training and finding the money? Because there is money for training for business folks. If you want to enhance the visitor experience, how are you going to do that? Are you going to develop some customer service training? That would be, I don't know anybody in the state as a community that is really doing that. It's a really missing part of the way we go about doing business. Sometimes people do it really well, and you open the door and it feels great. But there are barriers, over time, if you are in the customer service business, being able to kind of talk about some of the problems or issues you're having actually can help set that aside. And as a community, there are things you can solve about the way that you're selling, or the way that you're, talking to customers or giving them information or whatever it is you're doing. I would make a commitment about that, because I think it's fundamental to getting repeat business. Because you want that person living in Northampton to come down here and say, well, I went to have a look, and it was a great experience, and I'm taking my friends back next week.
The other thing that we're doing in the Manhattan Rail Trail, and we have kiosks, we have the little maps in it, and I've been out selling ads, and got a tremendous response from Easthampton, so that they will be designated along the trail, and we're also looking at signage, arrows pointing to key places in the businesses. So those are some other next steps.
Right. One thing I would add also is think locally and market globally. So the way you get to market around people who live right here, including the surrounding communities, is not the same as the way you're going to reach international people or the folks in New York or Boston. And don't overlook Boston. A lot of people in this part of the state often say to me, so over Boston. Don't do that.
Well, they ignore us, so.
Well, they do.
We love Boston. We're taking it. I used to live on that side of the state, so
if they know something's going on and they think they're going to miss out, they'll get in the car and come down the pike and look at you.
Yeah, we've had plenty of MCC reps come out from Boston just to see what we're doing here at Easthampton. So, John?
So along the lines of trying to think of a Bearfest type activity, and especially with the idea in mind of how could you garner a sort of compound interest, because I love Bearfest, everybody loves Bearfest, but then it kind of goes away. So I'd had the idea that if we proposed a project that was, I'd originally thought of it as a facade beautification project. I think we might be able to expand on that, but the original idea, to give you an idea of it, is if you look at the architecture in town, you look up at the beautiful facades, not only could you collaborate artists to building owners so that those become artistic, if you look at those, a lot of them, they're frames. You could make a really big project where you get artists to make a proposal and then they treat that as a canvas. And probably my favorite example is right across from the coffee shop, the barber shop there. It's got the barber pole, you know. If you look, there's just some black panels. Obviously they tried to do something, but it's just painted black. And I'm thinking, with all the artists in town, how crazy is it that we don't have an artist that says, hey, here's an idea, how about I do this? And then we make it an event so that everybody comes and checks out this outdoor gallery, if you will. But the thing that I like about it particularly is then once that's done, then when the next Bearfest or whatever comes along, that's still there. So you get a sort of a compound interest there. You get people that can come and check out the new event, but they're also maybe checking out the additional facade work.
What about, maybe, I thought of maybe a light, that's like constraints, but a lighting design festival where you maybe have like, you know, you pick a couple of streets where you have, you know, lighting designers who design things that are, you know, maybe not, and you change it out maybe 6 months, you know, not a 3-week show, but maybe a 6-month show, and then new lighting designers get to have at it.
For an energy efficient challenge.
Yeah, but you know, something that would be like light sculpture, you know, something that would be interesting enough that might be a way. I was just thinking, like, how do you link downtown to where the mill buildings are? Because there's that stretch. Huh?
Are you talking about on the street lights?
If you get permission.
Yes.
But also, when I lived in France for 2 years, and they used to have these events called Son et Lumière, which is English, you know, in English is sound and light. And they would take, like, say, the City Hall, and they would have, like, music, they would have bands, and they would just project artwork against, they would project stuff on the City Hall, huge, and they'd have these huge festivals in public squares.
I was just going to say, as far as projects or things that we already have here in the city, the pond itself is a pretty good canvas for doing events, used for several different things, and they're anticipating doing some other things on it. The Nashwauk Pond Committee might be another group you might want to get involved.
Other facts, did you get your hand up?
Yes, there are a lot of longtime local people who still aren't aware that there's art going on here. So
yes.
Yeah, maybe there's a way to engage. You know,
I suggest they rent an event at the Legion.
Why not?
It's very affordable. What I pay for an ad, I can rent that hall. It has a bar, it has a kitchen, and then you have the whole bar out in the front area too. It has 2 entrances, it has scads of parking, it has a beautiful little park down there.
So think of it as an event host space.
Yeah.
You've got 2 derelict dioceses.
Right? Yep. One of which is now a child care center. And which
The church is still.
the church is still empty. But was that the priest who approached us about
She's
doing
dead.
collaborations? She at the
They're all
child care
dead.
center?
This unfortunately is not a solution, but rather a challenge, and that is that, you know, nothing is really open around town after about 6, 7 o'clock, other than a handful of restaurants. Yeah, other than a handful of restaurants and bars. So I think as we look to this, we need to be mindful of the hours of operation and what we have in terms of encouraging our businesses to be open, our projects to be later. You know, what we fight against constantly is that everybody goes to Northampton after they get out of work because we're not open. So when we look to these projects, if it's not accessible, people aren't going to come. So we really have to be mindful in planning and looking to this as to, you know, the hours of operation for our town and for our community.
It's a very good point.
As well as Sundays. Open your businesses on Sundays. And I know a lot of you in this room are business owners. Just throwing it out there. Just open on Sunday.
Thank you, Kristen.
Or Monday.
Everybody, we have...
Monday too,
We
yes.
have a couple minutes left before we wrap up. We have some sheets right next to the food that you can write down more ideas. You can always contact me at info@easthamptoncarts.com or contact me at the Old Town Hall, and I'll get it to the subcommittee and the partners. And does anybody else before we...
If you didn't get handouts, they're up here.
Yes.
Behind Brian.
And if you have any ideas that you haven't shared, then please share them with us. Write them down with your contact information before you go, or as Brent said, contact her.
And thank you so much for being here. This is really great. These are great ideas that I think will really impact the applications. Thank you, everybody.
Well, that's all right.